Today we're going to work on Photoshop Classroom in a Book, Chapter 1, which is all about getting to know the work area. We're going to start in Canvas. Go ahead and grab the Photoshop Classroom in a Book Lesson 1 zip file and take it to your flash drive or your desktop. I've already downloaded it to my desktop. And you're as usual, right click to extract all and open up those files. Let's go ahead and see what's inside. Inside we've got a file called End and one called Start. You'll notice the difference between Photoshop and InDesign files in that we only have the native Photoshop files in here. We do not have all the extras that we have in InDesign. Let's go ahead and take a peek at End and see what we're creating today. Today we are creating a birthday card for Elaine, and we're going to play with how to create some colors and add some text. Go ahead and close that up. I can go File and Open and navigate to my folder, and I want the Start file. I'm going to go ahead and say Open. We're going to go ahead and, as usual, we're going to do a Save As. That way it preserves the original Start menu or document, so if you have to go back, you can. Let's go ahead and do a File, Save As, and let's call this 01 underscore card and save. So you're going to notice a few things about our document here. One of the first things I'm going to do is go to Window and Workspace, and I want to go ahead and work in Essentials. So I'm going to reset my Essentials, and it's going to take me back to the default layout of all the panels, just like we have in InDesign. Now I don't like to use this one called Libraries, so I'm going to hit these double arrows right here to collapse it, and I'm going to drag it over here underneath this History button so I get a little bit more real estate back. Notice you can, with your arrows, change the size of your panels. Obviously if you're working on a laptop you want to save as much room as you can in order to be able to work. So one of the first things we can do is look at what are our options. Just like in InDesign, in Photoshop on the left hand side we have our toolbars. If you hit the small triangles you get the tools that are hidden underneath. Let's look at what else we can see on our Photoshop. One of the things to pay attention to is this percentage right here. It tells you just how much are you zoomed in or zoomed out on an object. So right now we're looking at it 66%, so we're not looking at it at actual size. It's a good thing to pay attention to when you're not really sure how big your image is. We also see our status bar, which tells us a few things about the document itself. Right now we don't need to worry about it too much. So let's go ahead and start with zooming in. There's quite a few things we can do to zoom in for Photoshop. Alright, one of the ways we have to zoom is to do a Control plus or a Control minus. Control plus will bring us in, Control minus will bring us out. Notice how that percentage changes on the bottom corner down here. You'll notice the more you zoom in, the more you start to see those pixels in your document, because we are working with pixel or raster images here rather than vector. Alright, another thing we can do is go over here to the left to the zoom tool. You'll notice that as you go over the tools, they do give you tool tips that help you understand how they work a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my zoom tool, and just like we did in InDesign, I can click in the middle and zoom in, or I can go up here to the top and zoom out. I also at the top have a few other options. I can do fit screen, or I've got fill screen. So I've got a couple different ways to zoom in. We're not going to worry about the scrubby zoom because that's dependent more on your software. There's another way to look at it. If you go to Window and go to Navigator, Navigator gives you a thumbnail of your document, and you can zoom in and zoom out based on that navigator as well. So there's a lot of different ways to get in and zoom. It's something you're going to use quite a bit as you are doing the different Photoshop lessons. I'm going to go ahead and do fit screen. Alright, one of the first things we want to do is notice, I'm going to hit my move tool. You're going to notice that the photo quality is not very good. It needs an adjustment in brightness. In Photoshop, we work with layers. We did this a little bit with InDesign. We do it all the time with Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my rose layer. The next thing I'm going to do is add what's called an adjustment layer. So I'm going to go to Window and Adjustments. It's usually, if you're in Essentials, already docked there, and you get a whole bunch of different icons. The first one I want to work with is this little sun. It says Brightness and Contrast. You'll notice it has sliders that allow you to control just how much you're going to adjust the colors in that image. I'm going to go ahead and make my brightness 98 and play with my contrast at an 18. Obviously it's up to you as to how you're going to do it. Now that created what's called an adjustment layer if you look down here in your layers palette. What's nice about adjustment layers is that you are not actually destructively editing the pixels. You're creating what's called non-destructive editing. I can do something called turn the eyeball off here, and it'll turn that adjustment layer on and off for me. It also allows you to create several different effects if you want to try different kinds of things out. Alright, let's go ahead and Control S and save. Alright, one of the next things we're going to do is sample a color. So we're going to go over here to our layers column, and we want to make sure we're looking at this ribbons. Right now ribbons is turned off so we can't see it, so we're going to turn the eyeball on so we know that's the layer that we're on. I'm going to go ahead and select ribbons. See how it turned the kind of lighter gray? So I know that that's what layer I am working with. If I try and sample from this brightness and contrast, it's not going to see any pixels there, so it's going to come up with an error. Alright, so let's go under the ruler tool and grab the eyedropper. It's about the 5th one down. The eyedropper will allow us to sample colors from an image, as it's telling you right here. We want to go ahead and sample from the purple or bluish color right here. So I click, and you notice over here on the right hand side the color now pulls up in there. You can go ahead and change and adjust that a little bit. So normally in Photoshop your foreground and background colors are black and white. We want to go ahead and set that foreground color, and that's where I'm going to go ahead and click and do that blue. So there's obviously quite a few different ways to create different kinds of color. So one of the next things we're going to do is we need to add that box down here that said Elaine. So I'm going to go ahead, grab my rectangle marquee, and I'm going to draw a rectangle marquee that's, it's going to be about 2.5 inches wide and about 3/4 of an inch tall. So you'll notice as you start drawing, you get the width and height. Remember I said I want to be about 2.5 inches wide. So I've got that 2.5 and about 3/4, which is 0.75. And I'm not going for perfection here, so we're just going to do that. From there we get what's called the dancing ants. We get our selection. Now we need to color in this selection. So we're going to use the paintbrush. We're going to go right over here to the left hand side and grab our brush tool. We can also go to Window and grab Brushes. And it's going to give us a whole bunch of different information about the kinds of brushes that we have installed. General, dry, wet, special effects. We're going to go ahead and go for general and grab this soft round. Now, as long as your caps lock is not turned on, you should be able to see the size of your brush. You can use the square brackets, which are by the P, to change the size of that brush, or you can use your slider. Generally, because we have a selection, it will only color in where we have the dancing ants. So I'm going to go ahead and color over. Now because I have that selection, it'll let me do that. I'm going to go ahead and do Control D, which is going to turn my ants off. If I now try, I can paint anywhere on the picture, which I really don't want to do. I'm going to do a Control Z to undo that. Alright, so as we've learned in InDesign, there's quite a few different hidden tools. Photoshop is exactly the same. So one of the next tools we want to use is the Polygonal Lasso tool, which allows us to create a certain kind of selection. We want to go ahead and make a ribbon effect here on this box. So I'm going to grab my Polygonal Lasso. There's obviously quite a few different ways you can do things. If you hit Alt and click the different buttons, you can go through the tools without having to do the pull down. So it's up to you. Sometimes you just want to be keyboard, sometimes you don't. So we're going to go ahead and draw a freeform selection. I'm going to do Control plus, scroll in so I can see a little bit more. I'm going to close my brushes panel. So I'm going to grab my Polygonal Lasso. I'm going to click here, make sure I'm on my ribbons layer. I'm going to click and drag, but I'm going to let go of the mouse. I'm going to click again when I'm about the middle, about where I want my ribbon to go. Click again on the corner and click here on the top in order to close up that shape. Now I know the shape is closed because I have the dancing ants. So now I need to get rid of that part of the blue. In order to do that, I'm just going to hit delete. And now I have a ribbon shape that I didn't have before. So I'm going to go ahead and Control minus, Control D in order to deselect. Hit my move tool. You'll notice that I didn't do a great job of cutting it because I left part of this in here. I can go in, grab my eraser tool, and right now my eraser is shaped like a snowflake because I was erasing snowflakes. I'm going to go ahead and just grab a general brush, drag down, and correct that. Alright, so that's not in the directions if you're looking for it. So what are some of the other things we can do? We need to now play with the text. We need to add some text to this word here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit escape or my move tool, close everything out so nothing's selected. Now I'm going to grab my text tool, my type tool, and whereas in InDesign you had to draw a box for it to go in, Photoshop does not require you to do that. So let's go ahead to our top row and choose what type of font you would like to have. I've got about 10 jillion installed. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a font. I'm going to go to the next one. It'll tell me what types of samples we have available. So if there's bold, if there's italic, those items right there. It's going to say, okay, what size do you want it to be? Let's go ahead for 36. I'm going to go and have it right aligned, and it's okay that it's blue right now. We're going to play with the blue in just a minute. So I'm going to just type in here, and I'm going to write Elaine. But obviously, because this is the same color as my foreground color, we've got a problem. So I'm going to double click in my word, and we're going to go ahead and change the color of that. There's a few different ways to do that. One way is to go up here to Swatches. In Swatches, you have a couple different ways to look at your lists. Right now mine is in large list or small list, so I can go ahead and choose my color this way, or I can go ahead and scroll down and choose a different color. I'm going to choose pure green. And notice that that color changes right here in your properties as you go. Okay, I'm going to hit my move tool. I'm going to grab my Elaine, and I'm going to go ahead and slide it down just a little bit. Relatively easy. What's nice about Photoshop that you did not have with InDesign is that you can scale and change, and you could not do that in InDesign. If you hold Shift and drag, it'll keep your proportions. Alright, so now I've got the word Elaine. Now I can decide, hey, I really don't like that. It's going to say, do you want this? Yes, I want you to apply the transformation. There's also check marks up here at the top you can check to say that. So I'm going to go ahead and click out, Control minus. What if I don't like what I just did? I've got Control Z is an undo, or I can Control Z again to redo. With Photoshop, you can only undo the very last step you made. If you want to go back more than that, you need to go to your History panel. Go ahead and drag that down. And the History panel will go ahead and tell you every single thing that you've done so far. I like to go to Edit, Preferences, and File Handling. And it tells me quite a few different things. It tells me how many files do I want to show. Let's go up here to History Log. We're not really going to log our history. Let's go to General. So we can see a lot of different things are going on in the background. We want to go ahead and change how many files it will save. Here we go. Under Performance, History States. I like to bounce mine up all the way as high as it goes, because every single erasure, every single little tiny thing you do makes a change to your publication. So that's all we need with the preferences. Let's go ahead and say OK. Now, a few things you should know. Just like in Photoshop or in InDesign, you have the ability to move and place and change the panels around. So you can, if you want, take the swatches, drag it, and you can bring it over. You can bring it back in. You can dock it, see how it turns blue. You can use the double arrows to show or hide. So it depends on what you are going to be using. I generally always have my layers open because it's something you're going to use all the time. Adjustments is one you end up using all the time as well. So to turn this one in, you're just going to do File and Save. And you're going to go ahead and submit that PSD file. You do not need to package a Photoshop file. That's the difference between the Photoshop and InDesign. And that's all for this one.